as Natalie mentioned, AccurKardia is an ECG-based diagnostics company. And I wanted to just, before I get into what that means or what that is for those of you that might not be familiar, I wanted to just state what my goals are for partnering at this event, and that is to find KOLs or researchers that are interested in what we're doing and doing research in a related area, and or partnerships with pharmaceutical companies that could potentially benefit from our ECG AI-based technology. So if you see something that resonates with you, please come talk to me after this presentation. So what does AccurKardia do? We develop device-agnostic software to interpret ECG across a number of different indications. The first is ambulatory cardiac monitoring. So ambulatory cardiac monitoring, what is that? If you are suspected of having an arrhythmia, your primary care physician or cardiologist might prescribe for you a device called a Holter or a patch that will record your heart, the electrical signals from your heart over a period of a couple days to maybe up to a month. And sometimes they'll prescribe for you a mobile cardiac telemetry exam, which provides real-time feedback in case you might be at risk for a fatal arrhythmia that is occurring very intermittently. And so the way these studies are typically interpreted is that the data is then transmitted to an IDTF, an independent diagnostic testing facility, and then that entity has cardiac technologists who read these long duration files, again, a couple days to a couple weeks or even a month. They read it manually. And that is a very time-consuming process, and the timely turnaround of those reports can affect the quality of care to the patient, particularly if they have a concerning arrhythmia. And the volume of these studies are growing tremendously year over year. As well, both from the utility of these studies for catching cardiac disease, but also from the number of cases of heart disease expanding rapidly in the population. So that combined with reimbursement cuts to ambulatory cardiac monitoring studies, particularly Holter reporting, the providers of this service are under pressure. So what's the solution? Automation software to streamline that process and turn around that reporting more quickly. We can do that, and we are doing that right now. We launched in August of this past year, and we are growing 100x since then and rapidly further on. We think we can also support, so that's for actual patient care. We have 2 510K clearances but for this product, but we also believe we could support cardiac monitoring for clinical trials. So oncology drugs commonly have cardiac monitoring as an outcome endpoint for their agents, and so we think we could support that. So I just wanted to mention that. But beyond cardiac monitoring, just for arrhythmia assessment, we are expanding the use of ECG into a broad biomarker. So outside of arrhythmias, into cardiology, and even outside of cardiology. So I want to give a few examples of what that means. So just a couple. Just last year, actually, Mass General had a paper in Nature where they took unsupervised machine learning algorithms and turned it loose on ECG data and health system data, and were able to find that hundreds and hundreds of different types of conditions are detectable in the electrical signals of your heart. So it's not just cardiology conditions that are present or arrhythmia conditions, but even non-cardiology, diseases outside of the cardiology space have a physiological manifestation in the ECG. And what that means is you can use ECG as a tool to screen, monitor, and detect those conditions. That combined with the proliferation and the ubiquity of wearables like the Apple Watch with ECG or Samsung Galaxy Watch or Fitbit or Whoop devices that have ECG built in, you can now start using these consumer devices to start catching or screening for or monitoring various conditions. And so that is the central thesis of our expansion into the novel application space. So we started with the existing use case of automating arrhythmia assessment. We now have 2 beachhead applications, one for structural heart condition called aortic stenosis, which is the narrowing of the aortic valve and can cause a death in that patient within 2 years if it's a severe case. And then there's hyperkalemia. Hyperkalemia is excess potassium in the blood. That affects heart failure patients and chronic kidney disease patients, as well as many other patients, but the largest populations are those two. And that is basically caused by insufficient filtering from the kidneys, clearing out potassium from the blood, but also it's caused by the medications that are used to treat heart failure and kidney disease. So the cardiorenal medication, protective medications that treat chronic kidney disease and heart failure also exacerbate the condition. So then what happens is patients potentially go off of guideline medical therapy. So those are two beachhead applications that we're working on, but we're expanding well beyond that. We've done some early algorithm development and other electrolyte dysfunctions for cardiomyopathies, including cardiac amyloidosis, for different types of heart failure, including HFpEF and HFrEF. And then we have plans to develop applications for STEMI, MI, and liver dysfunctions. So let's go back to hyperkalemia. That's where I want to focus today, to paint a picture of what's possible, not only for hyperkalemia, but for other indications like it. So there's a typical cascade of events. So patients either have diabetes or hypertension. That leads to chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease leads to deterioration of the kidney function, causes elevated potassium in the blood. They then are typically prescribed a RAS inhibitor. That is a renin, angiotensin, aldosterone synthase inhibitor. So, and then any kind of drug, and there's broad classifications of drugs across that drug class, many different types of drugs across that drug class that protect the kidneys and the heart. They help those organs be more well perfused, but then it causes or worsens a hyperkalemia. Then what happens is the patient shows up for their monthly lab. They have a higher or elevated potassium. The physician gets scared of killing the patient, takes them off their cardiorenal protective medication, and then because they don't want them to get a fatal arrhythmia and die, then those patients potentially, after they go off their medication, have much, much higher all-cause mortality. Or if they don't intervene and the patient goes on to have an exacerbation, they end up in the hospital. And then those patients have a significantly higher mortality as well and a significant burden on the health system. So what are we proposing? We are proposing to monitor hyperkalemia using common everyday wearables. So we're not proposing to attach some kind of ankle bracelet that patients are uncomfortable wearing or dislike or some new thing that they need to have. We want to leverage the devices that they're already going to use for convenience and comfort and entertainment. So take the Apple Watch. Many of you in this room are wearing this, or Samsung Galaxy Watch, or Fitbit, or you name it. Any device with a lead 1 ECG, we are device agnostic and can technically work with it. We then have a companion app that sits on their mobile phone that will prompt the patient to take their ECG, and then we evaluate, using our algorithm that runs in the cloud, we'll evaluate that ECG for the presence of hyperkalemia. And then there's a physician portal, which the managing physician or a clinician can come in and see whether the patient is experiencing signs of hyperkalemia, or if there's an alert and they're trying to intervene, they can see what's going on, see a trend, see what the symptoms might be, and then when they call the patient, they can evaluate the condition to see if there should be some kind of intervention. So how is this platform uniquely differentiated? First, it is device agnostic. So we work with any lead 1 ECG device that meets certain basic technical requirements. It is consumer compatible, so it's not a proprietary device. We want to be able to be used with any device out there. That is the patient's preference. We are de-risked from a regulatory standpoint. We're not yet cleared, but we are well on the way to being cleared and be submitting for our 510K later on this year. But we are an FDA breakthrough device, and we are in the TAP program, which allows for us to get preferential reimbursement as well once we do get clearance. So a little bit around how this might work. Something didn't translate over here, so I got some lines turned around, but patient takes their ECG, the ECG is transmitted to our software in the cloud. The software then flags whether the patient has hyperkalemia or not. There's someone at a remote patient monitoring center that might contact the patient to intervene. Potentially, they might have on hand a potassium binder medication. Then they say, are you experiencing any symptoms? Did you change your diet? Maybe is there a change in medication? They go through that full context and then they say, you know what, I think you're experiencing hyperkalemia. Go ahead and take a dose of Lokelma, which binds with the potassium and causes you to excrete it through the GI tract. And so then you can help keep the patient on their cardiorenal protective medication by treating the potassium rather than taking them off their medication. And then they follow up with their clinical team, their normal clinical team, managing physician that could be their nephrologist. So how well does this work? We've done multiple very large-scale retrospective studies, one on 184,000 patients that we presented at AHA last year. And then we also did a lot of development at the Mayo Clinic and validated there as well. So this was our initial data, initial performance, which was great on just lead 1 ECG alone. So an AUC of almost 0.9, that's an excellent diagnostic. If you benchmark it against the very best diagnostics out there, that qualifies as excellent performance. And then similarly, outside of the Mayo Clinic, so this is a generalizable application, so you see a lot of models kind of fall apart when you go outside of the training institution. We actually had better performance at the Sharp Health System in San Diego. And then at ESC later this year, we're going to be presenting results on 600,000 patients, which show even better performance. And then we also have some model enhancements since we've done this initial validation work that improve the performance even further. So really, really bullish about this being a clinically useful technology. And we've actually started early pilot studies with one strategic pharmaceutical strategic partner. And we're looking for more as we enter into a large scale, go past pilot into a large scale powered study to show clinical utility in the real world setting. And then real quick, I just wanted to talk about the traction that we've had over the last couple of years. It's really picked up over the last year. We got our second FDA clearance at the beginning of this year. We have 2 FDA breakthrough device designations. We're now commercial. And again, we're at a point where we're looking for partners, both on the research side as well as pharmaceutical companies that see a potential for a hyperkalemia monitoring solution or for monitoring adverse events for a variety of other conditions, including hypokalemia, hypercalcemia, heart failure, et cetera, you name it. We would like to talk with you. Anyway, I'll stop there. Hopefully we caught up on time a little bit. I'm going to answer some questions. So we might apply a little bit of different signal conditioning. So some devices are noisier than others. Some are more prone to, say, motion artifact than others. So there may be a difference from one device to another around signal conditioning, but as long as it's lead 1 and it meets certain sampling requirements and things like that, the algorithm remains the same.